and welcome to the third episode of our podcast, which is a financial update. I'm Rebecca. We've got Daniel, who is the founder of Resolute You. And Dan, one of the things that came from our last podcast was that people were wondering about what's going on in the economy and more so about around the rising of fuel prices or diesel prices and how they're going to kind of adjust with it all. So we were talking about just before all the impacts of it, but can you now just repeat, because what you said was absolute gold, about what's going on with the economy, what we are to hopefully expect or just be aware of?
Yeah, morning, Becca Jane. Shit's about to get real, people. When we sit down and you see diesel over $3 a litre, we've got to actually sit back and look at how important of a fuel diesel is to Australia's well-being. If you're a farmer, predominantly everything you use on the farm is diesel. So I'll give an example. You went down to Gary and Jules, who's my brother and sister-in-law's farm they were managing, and he was a potato farmer. So they would use diesel to plant the potatoes. They would use diesel to cultivate the fields before they planted the potatoes. Then they plant them, and because they have to plant them during summer and in South Australia, just below the desert area, you got to keep those things watered. So they would effectively water 24/7 using a diesel generator. Then when they're ready to harvest, they use diesel to go through and harvest them. Then they've got to go to market. Well, they'll use a truck to market it. And then it gets produced. And then once it's produced into, say, chips, it's got to use diesel to get to supermarkets or the warehouses. And then it uses diesel to get to the supermarkets to get to us. So when you see diesel effectively doubling in price, it's going to have a flow down effect onto the rest of the economy. And that can be quite scary.
And you're also mentioning about what's going on with like the interest rate rises and that you think that there could be a few more coming.
Yeah, there's probably a couple more coming before we went on this folly with Iran. The economy has been progressing well through government spending and through private sector spending. And what's usually supposed to happen is if private sector pulls back, like we saw in financial year 24 and 25, that's the private sector is us and corporations investing in the economy. So as interest rates rise, we have less money to invest with. So we saw private expenditure and private investment reduce a bit. So what governments do is they then come in and take up the shortfall, which is beautiful because that keeps the economy going. But then when you see private expenditure start to come back in, and it did because interest rates started to come down, well, what governments are supposed to do is they're supposed to take some of their spending out of the economy because the private sector is kicked back in. But unfortunately, within Australia, we have a government who would make drunken sailors blush with the amount of money they're spending. And that's what happens is you bake in what's called inflation. If there's a greater demand for goods and services and there's a scarcity of goods and services, so high demand, low supply, prices rise. And that's what we're seeing. Everyone within my financial planning cohort is saying, holy hell, prices are just increasing. And you look at your insurances, for example, they're not going up by 2 or 3% by what the Reserve Bank says inflation is in Australia. They're going up 5 to 10% per year. And if you need to be protected, well, then you've got to wear that cost. Otherwise, if something happens, let's say your car and it's not insured and something happens to your car, well, not only do you not have a car anymore, you then have to pay the damage to someone else's car. So that's the flow-on effect of high interest rates. People don't have enough money to spend. So they then look back, well, what can I cut out to make ends meet? And that's a scary proposition. And we saw that 2 years ago when interest rates were at their peak. People were foregoing things to meet mortgage payments or to meet electricity payments or whatever it is. they had to meet. They forego something else because the pie gets smaller, but my bills get bigger.
Do you know what? It is something that really sort of concerns me, and I think we were talking about this before as well, is we need to have a realistic view of what's going on and what's happening. But I think that also, is there anything that you could say to not only your clients that you've got now, but also the new listeners that we've got? Like, what could you say? What are some tips and tools that we could use now that we could go, okay, interest rates are rising, everything's getting more expensive, food, fuel, what can we do?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Becca. And I specifically talk around capital allocation. Your capital is what have I got to spend? And at the end of the day, you've got to make sure that that capital can be applied to everything that you need it to be applied to. If you don't get out of bed, you still have rates, you still have insurances, you still have electricity, you still have internet bills, you have all that stuff that you have to pay for, irrespective. And what I think a lot of people need to start doing is understanding what their capital allocation is, i.e., how much money do I have to go around, and prioritize what needs to be spent. I had my youngest boy say to me, "Oh, Dad, can I borrow the four-wheel drive for work because I've got to put a ladder on?" And I said, "Yep, no worries, mate." And he goes, do you want me to fill it up?" And I said, "No, it's got a quarter of a tank in it already. Just use that. But also, before petrol prices rose, and as all of my client group tells me I'm such a cheap ass, I filled up 4 jerry cans of the $1.67 diesel because it was a really good price. And I thought, well, you know what? If petrol prices increase, well, I can use those jerry cans that I filled up well before the Iran war started as backup. And I've said to him, "Mate, we have to ration. I don't want to use more than a jerry can a month of fuel. My work schedule allows that to happen. I'm 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So I should be able to use things very sparingly." And I said, we have to ration. It's not like it was before where we could just go and do things because things were cheap. We actually have to ration, and we have to understand that, okay, there's going to be a true cost of all of this higher diesel fuel that's going to hit our grocery products in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I'm already complaining that I'll do my shop up when I come to Mackay, and I'll walk out of Coles with two half-filled paper bags, and it's cost me over $100. I mean, who's taking the piss here? That's
Yeah.
that's just daylight robbery. But that's going to get worse because the diesel costs that are going to have to be passed through the businesses. So farmers can't keep producing what they were producing at the same cost. Their prices that they sell to the wholesalers and to the supermarkets are going to have to go up. Well, the wholesalers and supermarkets prices are going to have to go up as well to reflect their increased costs. And ultimately, who bears that?
Yeah.
Hello, it's us.
I think what also heard you say, which is also really important, that we need to be intentional around what's going on, have awareness of what's happening, and then come up with some plans to mitigate. So you just said then about you saw petrol at a great price, so you went and filled up, which is amazing. I don't think that way. But then there's other ways as you're talking, I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe if petrol prices are expensive, people can catch public transport. What are some ways that when there's a pinch that you can actually start going, what can I do now to start reducing our spending to alleviate that? And there's a whole lot. So there's a whole lot that came through my mind, like buying at farmers markets, or buying things that are a little bit cheaper, or having a few meat-free meals. So you can just have curries, or you can have dals, which are very inexpensive. So there are ways that we can do to alleviate, but we just need to be aware of, and what you said as well, be aware of where our spending is. What are we needing? What have we got? What are we working with?
Becca Jane, that's yep. It's that comes back to 100%. Everything you said there is about capital allocation.
Mm.
How can I do things smarter with less is what we have to go through. And it's hard, right? This is not going to be easy for everyone, because what you're looking at is a increase in prices across the staples of what we need to survive. And people now are going to have to start to actually make choices. And my biggest thing would be to say is go for the low hanging fruit first. Some of the frivolous stuff we like to spend on, we may not be able to do that anymore. I'm going to give a prime example. I've got a client in my financial planning cohort, young lass, 28, wants to buy her first home. So when we had our meeting, she said to me, "Oh, I let go of my budget last year. I was going out a little bit more, and all of these sorts of things." And it's like, well, okay, that's awesome. But if you want to be able to buy a house, we may not be able to still do all of that. So you've got to make a choice. Do I want to buy a house, or do I still want to go out and live the life that I'd also like to live? So it's all about the choices. And sometimes they're not easy choices.
No.
We to survive, I've known when we were a four person family on one wage, we had to make choices because that's what we had to do to be able to survive. It's not going to be catastrophic. I don't believe it's going to be completely catastrophic. If it doesn't get sorted soon, then we're going to head down that path of, holy shit, what are we going to do? And that's going to be quite concerning. But it's just making the smart choices of what you need to do now. And to be able to say, well, okay, if I know my cost of living is going to increase, where can I look to allocate capital elsewhere or bring that capital in from somewhere else? And it's just making those smart choices that are
So
usually
tell
the
me,
most uncomfortable.
they are. They are the most uncomfortable. Um, Tell me about the interest rates, because you're mentioning that the interest rates might rise.
Yeah, so we've already seen an interest rate rise from the Reserve Bank, and that happened at the beginning of this month. So what they were concerned with is inflation being very sticky and not going down. So when we talk about being very sticky, it's just persistent. It stays there. You know, we want to have an economy that's got an interest rate between or an inflation rate between 2 and 3%. And that's usually our sweet spot from an economic growth perspective, because it means the economy's still ticking over. We're doing well, but it's not ticking over to an extent that you're going to have to raise interest rates. So we're getting growth where people are feeling a lot better within themselves, but it's nothing silly that's going to actually cause interest rates to rise. Unfortunately, our inflation rate's around that 3.5%, and it's very sticky, staying there. It's not coming down, and that's primarily due to the services effect of bills increasing and not coming down. I have yet to see, excuse me, Becca, man flu. I'm so proud of myself to be at work today.
I know.
I know. Um, when you sit down and you look at services inflation, that's wages, that may be insurance costs. It's all of those sorts of things, in electricity costs that flow through. The fallacy that governments portray to us, and I'm not going down any particular line of governments, that says we will be able to reduce prices. If we do this, prices will come down. No, once prices are set, that's the floor of what they are. Electricity prices will not get back to where they were years ago,
Mm.
because when people invest, they want to get a return on their capital. And to get a return on their capital means ultimately prices have to keep rising. Otherwise, people won't invest. So The wanky term is baked in, and that means our economy at the moment has a lot of headwinds that are pushing up inflation. And what the Reserve Bank's trying to do is to take some of those headwinds away to moderate those price rises. And the best way that they see to do that is to raise interest rates.
All right. Good one.
Can I nerd out about how interest rates work?
No.
It's
I don't
it's my
know. So
TISM
if people
superpower.
don't understand, put it underneath and we can come back and you can nerd out and explain.
Right,
But
Roger.
maybe if you just let us know, what does that then mean for the markets?
Yeah. I'm going to specifically talk to my financial planning cohort now. For the last 2 years, I've been running around like Chicken Little, the sky's about to fall in. We've seen some things that we haven't seen before, where Australian shares have been really high, and then international shares have been really high, and then property's been really high, and gold's been really high. Usually, if shares, which is a risky asset, is high, gold's low. And if gold's high, shares are low. When you see them all up there, it tells me there's bubbles in the economy. So for a couple of years, I've been screaming, it's going to fall, it's going to fall, it can't keep doing. And what I did is I actually took risk off my clients' portfolios. So what I mean by that is, if they were invested at a 70% growth and 30% defensive, I said, look, if we do have a fall, you're going to get hit. I'll pull you back to 60-40. So I took what's called risk off the table because I knew something was coming. I can promise you my bingo card didn't have Iran getting attacked that would cause this. That wasn't on my radar. It was.
But 2 years ago, Ukraine, like that was that war, like the Ukraine.
Yeah, but that had been, we're coming into the 5th year of that. So the markets
Is
had,
it 5 years?
Yep, since 2020, February 22, he kicked off. We're in our 5th year. Well, actually, he invaded in 2014, so we're actually in our 12th year, but let's not split hairs.
Okay.
The markets don't like uncertainty. So there was a pause when he invaded that the markets fell because it was uncertain. And then once the markets understood the mechanics of what was happening, they stabilized and raised and they went up. So the markets don't like the uncertainty of what's happening in Iran. If the Strait of Hormuz closes, which is, a choke point, so of course it's going to close, then there's a lot of ships that aren't coming out with fuel that the world needs. And it also flows through to natural gas and the natural gas byproduct, which is your plastics, which is your urea for your fertilizer. People in Australia have got to understand primarily we're an agricultural country with mining and some manufacturing. So if farmers' costs through 1, diesel, and 2, fertilizer rises, well, those costs have got to be borne by someone. That's us. That will ultimately bear it. So
now you've asked me about how that go back to link it right back now to the markets again, like how
yep.
the fertilizer and the
So
increase.
So the increased cost. So when we sit back, those things don't necessarily drive the market conditions. It's the uncertainty of what's going to happen.
Right.
So the uncertainty of, well, okay, if we can't get the diesel, if we can't get the fuel and the natural gas, and then we can't get the fertilizer, well, how's that going to impact everything? So when you have companies that are reliant on those 2 things and they're on the share market, they may fall. I've got one of my good mates works out in the mines out in the coalfields in Queensland, and he says his digger burns through 8,000 litres of diesel every 12 hours. So what you're looking at there for a coal company is their throughput costs are rising, yes? Because the diesel costs are going up. That's a throughput cost. The price of coal doesn't rise or the price of coal falls. that company is facing an increase in prices and a decrease in revenue, yes? So what does that do to their share price? It goes down because they're going to see less profitability for that company, so their share price is going to get whacked. But it's the
Okay.
uncertainty of what's happening is causing the markets the most grief. If you go back to 2023 before March, the markets were like this. They were volatile. That was because there was a huge, powerful army surrounding Iraq, and they were waiting for the go-ahead. But the markets didn't know if the war was going to kick off. So they were very volatile. And as soon as they knew that Iraq was going to be invaded, they had the certainty to understand what was going to happen. And that's one of the things that actually kicked off the market growth from 2003 to 2007. You had that understanding of what was going to happen. So the market started to grow because we could now understand. It is the uncertainty that's causing all the volatility in the market. For my clients, my job has completely been to protect your downside risk. That's my whole job, is to make sure you don't lose a significant amount of money if things happen. Because I was Chicken Little, I took risk off the table to allow for things like this to happen. So we're good. For my clients, we're good. It's scary, but we're not going to make stupid choices. That's my other job. Two jobs.
Yes.
Protect downside risk and don't let you make stupid decisions.
So what's good I'm hearing you say is for your clients, it's amazing. You saw it, you've done it. But for others, and you mentioned about you changed the 60/40 in the, what was that of? Like, so
So that's
people who
how
are
people
listening
are
could
invested.
how they're invested.
60%
Okay.
growth, 40% defensive.
Okay. Right. Perfect. So what happens next after all this? Like, so once there's no knee-jerk reactions and you stay disciplined, like what happens next in the markets?
But if I knew that, I'd be the wealthiest man in the world.
Mm.
There's two ways things are going to go. If it's concluded quickly and there's less disruption, you will see share markets bounce back because we've got certainty. We know
Yeah.
there's still going to have to be shit that's got to flow through the system, but we can deal with that. But we've got certainty. So markets would stabilize and then they would look to raise from that. If things don't sort themselves out, then we're in for a period of a great deal more of uncertainty. And then that's baking in more risk.
Okay.
If more risk for your economies across the world.
So I guess what I'm sort of looking at then is there's a lot of uncertainties at the moment that we've talked about. We've talked about the interest rate rise. We talked about the fuel, how long that's going to go for. We've talked about the the markets, like, so what should people focus on then? Because there's no certainty at the moment outside. So,
The biggest thing that people should focus on is to try to ignore the noise and just look after their community, right? And if we don't make knee-jerk reactions,
yeah.
I'll give you an example. Jay's my 24-year-old son. He's actually loving this volatility at the moment because he's got 36 more years before he can touch his super. So he knows as the share market goes down and his work puts money in every month for him, he's buying assets at a cheaper price. He loves that because he knows it's going to recover. So he's not stressing himself about the markets falling. His biggest takeaway is, well, that's a Jay's issue for 20 years' time, not for today. For those of us who are older, you need to take a bit more notice of what's going on because time, TikTok, you don't have a lot of it.
Mm.
Jay's got 36 years. A person who's 55 and wants to retire in the next 10 years is is looking 10 years ahead. So what I'm doing for our family and the advice I'm giving for my clients is buckle up, look at your spending, be a little bit more diligent with what you're spending. Yes, it means we don't go and do all the things that we want to do, but that's okay because there'll be time for that when the time's right. And don't panic and make knee-jerk reactions. Think things through.
Yeah.
And then make the action.
I think what you said as well, which is really clever as well, is to become really aware and crystal clear on what you're spending and what you need. And then come up with ideas of what you can then cut out if there's anything else to be able to ride whatever and however long this goes. We've got some free resources for people to work out their capital allocation. So we'll put that in where they can find that. So is there anything after all that amazing thing, is there anything that you could do to kind of finish off to say it's all like, not that it's all good because people, it's never like, it doesn't always have to be all good, but what can we leave on a bit of a high that people can?
This isn't something that we haven't seen. This has the echoes of the 1970s fuel crisis. And I appreciate that some people, you and I were born in the early 70s, so we lived through it, but we didn't live it because we didn't understand it.
I'm mid 70s,
just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jane.
Don't put me in your category.
Well, Sally Ann would be very early 70s then.
Yeah,
so
that's it.
let's bring her into that to make us both feel better. Hi, Sally Ann. We've seen this before, and we will get through it. It's nervous because for a lot of people, they haven't seen this before. I've been talking to people about the GFC. So that was 2007, 2008, 2009. And we're in 2026 now. So that's 18, 19 years ago. So for the kids who are coming into the workforce, they may have been born just at the end of it or part way through it. But just because you were born in there, you didn't live it. For those of us who are 30, you were still too young to actually understand what things were going on. You understood there was an issue, but you didn't actually understand what the issue was. It was your parents who went through those things. So we've done it. We will get through it. Will it cause people to make some decisions that they don't want to make? Yeah, but that's life. We sometimes have to grind it out, and this is going to be one of those things where we do grind it out, but it will get better. And if you can buy something at a discount to what you could have bought it for earlier in the piece, that's not a bad thing either. We all love discounts. And it's keeping that same methodology. I'm not saying to go out and to buy anything, but I want people to look at and to understand that as the share market falls, especially with all of us being in super, as the share market falls, your super fund goes in and buys cheaper assets every time it goes in to buy because the share market's falling. You then get more assets. So when the share market recovers, which it will recover. It's just a timing of when it recovers. And for those who are at the later stage of your life, that's a bit more scarier than for Jay because he's got plenty of time. When it recovers, you actually have more assets and then you're going to be wealthier. And you may not have actually done anything because someone's done that behind the scenes for you. So don't panic. Make really good, well thought through decisions to get you through this. If you have to hunker down for 6 months, hunker down for 6 months. Yeah. And then when this comes again next time, because there will always be a next time, you go, I've got a lived experience now. I actually know what I need to do. Yeah. So I'm just going to do that. Where for a lot of us, we haven't got a lived experience. So from a cranky old financial planner, buckle down, get rid of your discretionary spend only what you need to spend. And I call it a just in case fund. and incur a just in case money where you squirrel money away that you can allow things to be built. And it doesn't matter how much that is. If it's $5 a week, it's $5 a week.
It's
But
better than
you're
nothing.
correct. We sometimes get, you know, I embarrass my children because as a father, that's my job. And this is my last thing on it. The biggest thing about the olderish generations is we understand the value of money a lot better than what this younger generation does. Remember the time when we could, at Jericho, we went to the corner store and you'd walk in with a handful of 1 and 2 cent coins and you'd walk out with this big bag of lollies. So we got to value if we could find a 1 cent piece on the ground or a 2 cent coin on the ground, we'd pick it up because we knew what we could buy for it. That value's disappeared now, but our rationale is the same. If I see a 5 or a 10 cent piece on the ground, I pick it up because that's 5 or 10 cents more I've got now than what I had.
Yeah.
And then I apply that philosophy to how I go through and spend my money. It's just adapting for the circumstances that we're in, knowing that it is shit. Don't get me wrong, it's shit. No one wants to be in this situation because some muppet who's got the brain capacity of a goldfish didn't think things through. We wear the outcome of those consequences. But buckle down, understand where your money goes, build a little just in case buffer with the surplus funds that you've got. And people may say, we don't have surplus income. 2 things you can do to grow your wealth: increase your income, cut your expenditure. If you need to take another role on that you may not like, then do. I got one of my clients to draw this. Harry Bruce, the cartoonist in Mackay, is beautiful. I tell all my clients that I go and collect cans because at the start of it, I had a 10-year-old son who wanted to go, or a 12-year-old son who wanted to go to India for a soccer tournament. I said, no worries, champion, how are you going to pay for it? And he just looked at me blankly. And I said, well, the containers for change, let's go do that. And through that, over a course of 12 months, we saved up $6,000 to go and on an overseas trip to India for his soccer, right? I still go out and collect cans now. Do I need to? Not really. But you know what? When we were down the Gold Coast for our family get together, and I saw a homeless man who had autism collapse on the train it wasn't the train, it was the what's those things outside Nana and Danny's place?
Tram.
Tram. Started with T.
You were close.
Ran. A whole group of us helped him up. He said thank you, and he said, "Oh look, I'm homeless," and blah 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 blah. So I took $50 out of my wallet and put it into his and said, mate, just make sure you get some water and have something to eat. I didn't have to think about that because I had discretionary money from doing this. It's the most unglamorous job in the entire world, but I'll go out and do it. But stay out of my bins because they're mine.
I'm wondering if we should just finish on that one, on that
Yep.
note. Stay out of Dan's bins.
It added anything that you've got from today, stay out of my bins.
All right. God bless. We'll do another podcast later. Thank you very much. And of course, if you have any questions or anything that you would like us to cover, let us know. You can contact us through Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or we've got TikTok. All right. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, Becca Jane.
Bye.